Okay, so I've been watching Rick and Morty recently. I know the cringe of like their fan base, but I ran out of Simpsons episodes to watch. So like after how many years of finally fully caught up, and then I tried watching Futurama, and I think you heard in the last episodes, like my issue with Futurama is like after a couple of seasons, it really declined. Like they always talk about Simpsons declining, which personally I don't think it really like. By the time it declined was maybe around the the late season 20s, like season 28 or something. Basically, to be honest, I mean, I'm not saying that's when it declined and like where there's an obvious shift, but it felt like I started noticing it more after that Elon Musk episode, where I was like, oh, Simpsons kind of changed. So I don't know when that was, what season that was, but yeah, when the Elon Musk episode happened, that's definitely when, like afterwards, like I started noticing there was a decline. Like they started doing Lisa episodes more. Like it's not that I don't like Lisa, it's that she's just a boring character. Like when they try to force her character down your throat because she's not fun.
Like there was a point where Lisa was a very likable character and like a very funny, approachable kind of character, and like where you enjoyed seeing her be in each episode, and she was funny, she was cute. The brother dynamic with Bart was great. Even her being like the voice of reason wasn't intolerable, but there was like a certain point where they have a word for it called flanderization, where like after a point they kept doing that, like she became a character of her character, where she stopped losing the dynamics of like she sometimes acted like a little kid, sometimes she acted immature, but now she became like the voice of reason is her only personality trait now. Like she's some type of like 20-year-old liberal arts student in a 7-year-old body. It doesn't make sense. It's so that's annoying.
Like the reason why people watch Simpsons is because of the comedy. It's because of like the storytelling that they do, the unique like shifting of A and B plots and stuff like that, and sometimes like a random C plot that they have like in one episode. At least that's why I watch. And like when they do these Lisa episodes, there's too much like preaching like to the choir, and it's like it's just not fun. Like they take themselves too seriously as if they I don't know, it's just not fun. But that's not really what I want to talk about. Back to Futurama. Futurama, like there was a definite decline, like constantly. It's just getting worse and worse each season to me. And I know Reddit loves to talk about Futurama, and it finally came back after a while. That's why I started watching it, because it has this cult following. And I started watching Futurama. There's like these horn dog episodes constantly. I already talked about in a previous episode. Like they always use Amy as like their token for talking about like freaking horn dog stuff, and use Amy as like the punching, like not punching bag, but use her as like a excuse to, I guess, be horny as a writer, where it just stopped being as interesting to me because I started noticing it more and more how much they do it. And I'm just not into those type of stories. And then the stories started becoming more like less about the future, because it used to be like the future episode, like their view of the future was unique, and you're like, oh man, I never thought about that, or oh that's funny, or oh that's very interesting. They're like the conversations that they're trying to have about like future society or interacting with aliens and stuff. But then they started, like especially in this very recent seasons, they started like not even like there's this weird, like not that it's weird, but it's just like I don't care about Fry and Leela plot. Like, oh man, they finally get together. Like I don't really care. Like that's not why I watch Futurama. Or oh man, their romance. Or oh like uh like it's just weird. It's just not fun. And they start like doing more and more horn dog stuff with like Leela and Fry, or with Leela in general, or with Amy in general. It's always loose clothing, always this. And I know it's weird as a dude to say this stuff, but it just doesn't appeal to me because it's not only distracting, but it's so forced. where it's like, okay, this is not, there's nothing funny about this, there's nothing interesting about this. Like, okay, there's boob. I've seen a boob before. Like, seeing it in cartoon form doesn't appeal to me. I don't care. I'm just here to laugh. Like that's the whole reason I watch it. Is to laugh, not to like, oh man, it's a virtual parade. Ooh. Like, okay, oh man, she's talking about like random porn dog stuff that dudes talk about that she's a woman now. Huh? Whoa. So I stopped watching Futurama basically because of that. And then I was like, oh, let me switch to Rick and Morty. Like it's kind of similar to Futurama in that regard that it's like talking about like, you like going to different places in space and aliens, and apparently has a very well regarded show, even though the fan base is cringe and they're all Redditor cringers. But I was like, okay, let me give it a shot. And I instantly really liked it. Like, the comedy's really well done, the storytelling's done well done, it's unique plot lines and stuff like that. But the same issue over time, it started becoming more and more horn dog. Like, every time they talk about Summer is just like is basically the Amy of that show. Like anytime Summer comes into frame, they use her as like I wish women talk this way. So I'm gonna make a character who talks how I think as a horn dog male writer, like where she has no like lines other than something that has to do with like something sexual every time. And I get at, to a point that it's about like, oh, this is how teen girls are. But to a point where it's just like where she could, it's like, does she have any other character like design other than being this? Like, okay, she's supposed to be a teen girl who is very like who, is very horny or whatever. But like, that's just having that as her entire character design is like not preferable. And it's the same with Morty. Morty became like a Lisa in a way where like, okay, I get it. Like, he's supposed to be moralistic while Rick is supposed to be, balls to the wall kind of thing. But it's, he's it's too much after a point where you're just like, okay, here it comes. Morty's gonna say, oh, I don't want to do this because of this, and then it ruins everything. And then, that's how the plot progresses. But it's like, I don't know, after a while it just gets old. And then they also use Morty as like, okay, he's a horny 14-year-old. Like, he's constantly talking about like wanking off and like watching porn or whatever, where you're just like, okay, I get it. I get it. I got it like 2 seasons ago when you said this. Like you can talk about more than this. And like I still like the show a lot more than Futurama, but it's slowly getting to me how much like every other episode is like a horn dog episode. I don't know if they do it to bring in more viewers or to like satisfy their fan base, because I know their fan base is super cringe and they defend these episodes. Because usually I'll look up like, these horn dog episodes and I'd be like, am I the only one thinking this? And there'll be like a thread or a post that talks about it, but then people under the comments are fully defending it, saying like, "Oh, this is the best episode ever." Oh, blah 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 blah. I don't like, you're just mad because of this, or oh no, this they've been hinting that this character was like this for years. This. So the episode that finally kind of broke the camel's back with it was it's called like Beth Twintastic or something, where she has a clone of herself and she has a lesbian relationship with her clone, and that's the whole episode basically. Like there's a B plot line of them playing like games, this like realistic game simulator, which is kind of funny, but that's not what the whole episode is about. That was just kind of like a side plot, because they're dealing with like knowing their mom is doing this with her own clone or something. So the majority of the episode was this, and it ends with the husband leaving, and then he becomes horny because he's like, oh man, but I'm just mad because I don't get to watch, or I don't get to, I didn't give you my permission to do it, but I do want this to happen. Where I'm like, what the heck is happening? This like this is not even like, there's nothing there. I didn't laugh other than the game plot thing, the realistic games, which is kind of funny. Like beyond that, I didn't laugh once. I didn't like find it interesting. I was like, what is this? And I go to online to see, and it's the same thing. People are going like, this was the best episode of the season. Oh, this was amazing. Oh no, this was so funny. I was laughing the entire time. I'm like, what? What is there to laugh about? It was just a horn dog episode for a horn dog writer who just wanted to, write about his lesbian relationship fantasy, and then he probably wrote himself in as the husband and be like, oh, man, wouldn't it be great if, this happened and then you get a threesome? Where I'm like, this is so stupid. This is not. So it finally broke me. I'm complaining to a friend about the episode because I'm like, this is so stupid. Of course, the friend is a girl, so she obviously didn't approve of the episode either. But it got me thinking because, we're talking about these cringe dudes who, like, their freaking dopamine receptors have been completely fried due to porn, due to how the internet is.
Even with anime, like, how the anime community is, where though much anime isn't too cringe, like, sometimes I haven't watched anime in such a long time, but I'm talking about, like, earlier, I guess, in the early years, there were cringe anime, there were good anime, there were, like, normal ones, you know? And maybe there was an occasional fan service scene, but it wasn't, like, the entire show. But nowadays, it kind of flipped where a lot of it seemingly is a lot of fan service, and it becomes, like, almost a parody of itself. And, the fan base, super, super cringe, super, super horn dog constantly. And that's one of the reasons why I stopped watching anime is because of that. Like, where, say, you can't see an anime without, like, feeling embarrassed because of, like, how much of the scenes are like that. You can't even look at, like, post online about anime because, the dopamine receptor fried fan base where they're constantly, like, horn dog, they're constantly showing horny, like, crap. You can't, like, look at a meme about anime without it being, like, somehow some reference to sex or some reference to horn dog type stuff. So it makes me wonder, like, because supposedly so many of, like, say, Gen Z or, like, in that area and younger, because you see people even younger and younger, like, getting into this type of mindset or getting into these type of groups or whatever. And it makes me wonder about the whole, like, ratio of, like, male to women kind of relationship or whatever. Because you hear on the news, Gen Z, most males are single or whatever, or even virgin or never been with a girl at all. And so it pushes them even further to these types of communities or these types of shows where they don't see what's wrong with it because that's all they watch. They're constantly, basically dopamine fried by this horn dog stuff where they don't even see what's wrong with, like, say, wearing a hoodie of anime stuff with, whatever the thing's called, where they have their tongues sticking out with the drool or whatever, where it's a whole uh, freaking hoodie of that. Or, having wallpapers of, like, random anime, like corn dog type stuff, or, like, being subscribed to Reddit subreddits where the whole point is just, basically, like, where they're just constantly posting stuff like that or whatever. Where or openly talking about porn or openly talking about masturbation stuff or whatever, whatever. Where I'm wondering, like, you know, it seems like it's majority like the male community, obviously, a male gender or young male gender that is doing that kind of stuff. And it seems like the female obviously do not like that. So, you hear about more females just sticking with being single or only kind of doing fling type stuff. And you hear more about males just not even being in the dating scene. They're completely removed and it pushes them even further. They become more incel type level, or they become more like they hate women or whatever because it's like a kind of a defense thing against, like, the inability to, find a female kind of thing. So it makes me wonder about future wise. Like, how, what are the future perspectives of, like, this, because it's kind of a worldwide thing. It's happening in Asia, where you hear about people having babies less or, like, having less, relationships or whatever, you know? Even in Hong Kong, I noticed that or whatever. Or it happens in America, happens in Europe, happens in, you know, everywhere. It's a global thing where, there's this huge subset of men who are having no relations due to, certain mindsets or whatever. And there's this huge subset of women who've kind of not given up on men entirely, but have not high standards, but they have standards that these cringe men cannot meet because, they're stuck in their ways or whatever, whatever. And there's, like, you could argue there's many reasons for this. You could argue one is, like, there's no more financial dependence to the man because, women are having higher wage jobs now. They have their own independence, so they don't need to succumb to certain personality traits of their significant other. They're the ones who are it's a what's it called, is a woman's market or whatever. Like, the women are in power now. They're choosing the men who they want. And, the men that most of the women's are preferring are a smaller subset of the whole men. So it might be, let's just say, it might be only 20% of men who are worthy of even having some type of girl in general. And then there's maybe 50% of men who can maybe get a girl if they change their ways or if they are less like if they clean themselves up kind of thing. And then maybe there's a whole other 50% who are just completely out the loop. Like they can't. It's nearly impossible for them to find a female. And people have or women are or just people in general are having babies later and stuff and stuff. So I'm wondering how is the future gonna be then? Because obviously it's not gonna just suddenly change. I think it's just gonna get worse and worse, if anything. People are gonna latch on to the things that they can control in the way. Like, they're gonna watch more anime, they're gonna get lost more into the fantasy. Because I even noticed that with me when I watch anime. It makes reality seem flawed, and it makes you, like, wish more and more for, like, how like, the world of anime is because it's simpler. It gives you false realities of how things work. The world's more complex than that than the anime, but you wish for the anime world because it's less complex. So it pulls you away from the reality in a way. And you start like, you go like, oh man, I wish, for example, I wish I had a Japanese girlfriend. Because obviously it's gonna be like, because anime's in Japan. So obviously the women there act like that. And they would be more likely to like me, or I'd be a happier person if I moved to Japan or whatever, 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 which is a complete false of how it actually works. But still, that's the reality that you create when you watch more and more of the anime or more and more of this certain stuff. So I don't think the people are going to change. I think it's just, if anything, it's going to get worse. So to bring it again, to repeat, how will reality change then, or this future change? And I'm wondering, will it be like dating apps, where it just ends up that the same small subset of this reasonable men, let's say it's only 33%, one third of men will have the option of like, the whole subset of women, you know, where like it's just like how dating apps are, like where what's it like 20% of men have 80% of the women or whatever on dating apps because the women only swipe they have the choice, so they're not going to swipe the cringe freaking men. They're only going to swipe the chads, and the chads, they might swipe with anyone. It depends on the horn dog of the day. So if anything, the those 20% of men are like flipping between these 80% of women. And that remaining 80% just got to get lucky of the men to get with that last 20% who might of women who might just be super super desperate, or they might be very like, they're willing to go down the stairs because maybe they're older, whatever, whatever, whatever. So I'm wondering, is it going to be like that kind of that economy or whatever the word is, where there's just a huge split, where it's almost like a kingship type thing, where there's just this small subset of men who have who either hop around multiple women, or it's just going to be only this 20% who are husband, wife, or whatever, have kids or whatever, and the rest are just single. Or what I wonder is, will it be like basically what you see happening slightly now, but it's still kind of cringe. But where basically, because say a company or government will notice, oh, people are dating less, but it's kind of human nature to want love or want some type of like whatever relationship. So they start relying more and more on AI relationships or robo girlfriends, robo boyfriends, or whatever, to deal with that subset of people who are just never going to have a relationship, or those women who just can't find a partner who suits their needs or whatever. So will it become like that, where almost a robo type of relationship starts to become encouraged, or at least becomes profitable? Because you see it already happening, but I think it's kinda cringe. I think as of now, it's freaking mental disease. Like, the people who are like, "Oh, I fell in love with ChatGPT." Where it's like, how that doesn't make any sense, because for me, the issue with the ChatGPT is that it doesn't remember anything. Like, there's that whole context, whatever, they only have so many characters of context that they can store, or at least that they can use to predict the next word. And that context let's just say it might be the length of like 30 pages in a book. But life is not going to be just 30 pages. Your entire, like a relationship or things that you have to remember is not just 30 pages of a book, you know? And then, like, say, as time moves on, like, say, a normal person, like, say, uh, I don't know, any person you talk to, they might remember some odd random fact from a year ago. ChatGPT will not remember it in detail. It might have a summarized version, like, oh, he went to the store and then a fight happened. But it won't know, say, for example, why the fight happened. It won't know like the details of the fight, how it made you feel, uh, what were the repercussions afterwards, and put that into the context with everything, because it's too much. It's too many words, because it has to store everything else too. There wasn't just that one fight that happened within a year or whatever, or that one crazy event or one thing that was special to the person. So the AI can't remember, it can't like prompt you, like, because how the AI works, it needs words to predict what the next word is. So it needs a prompt. Meanwhile, a normal human, they can just text you on the random part of the day because they're going through life too. And they can have just a random thought and send you a text. And then now you're having a conversation about that. But the AI, it will always need a prompt. Rather that it keeps like a stored set of things that it always prompts for during the day. But either way, it always needs a prompt. So it's not going to be like a natural back and forth conversation, or like, you always have to start the conversation every time. It'll be like, oh, this happened today. And then it responds to you. But it doesn't respond to you personally. It responds like based off the prediction or maybe that little bit of context that it has. But it's not going to be natural. So there's still like a separation from reality where this thing's kind of not real, or it's not as natural as a real relationship. So in my opinion, right now, the AI girlfriend, whatever kind of thing that they keep trying to show on the news, like, oh, there's another guy fell in love with ChatGPT. I think that's just mental disease, literally. Like, no offense to them, but to me, it's no different than like in the past where you hear about like some person in Japan who married their anime doll, where they're like, oh no, I really fell in love with this anime character, and I hear her, blah 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 blah. Like, where you're like, oh, that guy just has a mental disease. He just, he needs some mental help. Like, it's no different than the ChatGPT to me, because they're not. It's not realistic enough. It's not contextual enough. But still, you see, there's a growing trend though. So over time, as the stuff gets better and better and better, I wonder, then will that just be the solution? Where to fix this flawed ratio, they're just going to fully embrace the robo AI kind of thing, where it's like, oh, you can build your own girlfriend and it acts how you wish, or you can build your own boyfriend and it acts how you wish and looks how you wish. You can see it in your AR glasses. So, no one else can see it, but at least you can. And it's no different than someone doing a long-term relationship, I guess. Once these things get smart enough, and then they will add, other types of crap to make the relationship more sentimental or more physical or whatever. And then like, I guess for the baby thing, it would be no different than, say, a sperm bank or whatever. There'll be egg banks, sperm banks. If a girl with a freaking robo boyfriend uh, wants a baby, they go to a sperm bank. For the opposite, a dude goes to an egg bank. They already have artificial wombs that they're creating now, so that would be no issue. It's not like you would just need the egg at that point. And what I wonder also, will it be something like, where it'll be the more expensive option will be having an actual baby, because now you need to do the artificial womb, or you have to do the artificial insemination, whatever, in an actual woman, which was probably even more expensive than the artificial womb. Or will there like then, or you have the option, if they're at that point they're that smart, you just get an artificial baby. Where you're just like, well, I'll do what I did with the girlfriend, just have an artificial baby too, artificial child, the perfect child who looks exactly how I want and acts exactly how I want, blah 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 blah. And I wonder if anything, it'd be pushed for by those what do you call them? The people who are like not the genetic racists, I forgot what they're called, where they're like, oh, well, this is good actually. Like, in the back of their head, they probably wouldn't say it out loud unless they're freaking podcasts, whatever. But they would be like, oh man, this is good actually, because the people who can't find a real woman, they don't deserve to procreate. So an artificial baby will keep our human guidelines perfected. Only the most perfect humans will grow, who will start to populate, and then over time, people will use less AI. Da 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 da. So I wonder if that's just the future that we're headed to, because it seems like it is. Because I don't see how it could change based off of what the earlier conversation. Like we're this kind of horn dog culture is becoming more and more common. It's like vices have been replaced because like you hear that like apparently I don't know how true it is because it's not like I don't really see people who are becoming more and more like this, but they say on the news like, "Oh, Gen Z, they're drinking alcohol less, way less, than the previous generations. Gen Z has completely embraced the sober culture, or oh, they're smoking less, or this." Where I'm like, is that true? Because I don't know. I mean, I know the amount of people I know is not like a realistic view of the entire world, obviously. But it seems like people are drinking just as much, unless it turns out that people in the past were constantly drinking, like drinking for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Because it's not like I don't see people going out on like buying beer or whatever, or drinking on the weekends, or going to parties or whatever. So I don't know if it's because like we're in a technical, like not full recession, but we're in a technical recession, and people are just buying less. Like they're not drinking every single day. They're just waiting until the weekends. And once things pick up again, if they ever do, people start drinking like crazy again because this stuff costs money. But either way, if that is true, then people are just replacing that vice with basically the horn dog type stuff, with porn, or with certain TV shows or certain games or whatever. Where now it's becoming like I get it, but it's still crazy to me. I don't know. But yeah, I guess that's my prediction. Is or yeah, I guess it is my prediction. Is the freaking AI thing. So yeah. I guess that's about it.